Welcome, namaste. I'm Master Lama Rasaji, and I'm so happy to be with you today. Love all of you, and thank you for taking the time for your busy schedule to visit with us today. If you look out over here, you will see the Nepal border, and then over here is the Himalayas, and I have been at this border a few times or two, so it brings back a beautiful journey and a beautiful memory. After spending 4 years with Master Lama Boyang, I was just wondering and stuff, everything to do. So it's nice, of course, to be with you, and so it's on the couch, Nate, on the back of the couch. Just turn it off. Having some electronic interference there, and yes, and so we're happy that today we want to talk about, ironically, the embracing the silence of Tibet. You know, when I was a young child and going through a lot of illness, I was definitely been, quote, to be hyperactive. There's no question about it. And as I got into the martial arts in my teenage years and yoga, it was really funny to watch it. But I began to channel that energy in a different way, and as I did so, I noticed that I began to slow down. I remember in 1975, for the first time, when I was taught the standing exercises in our first exercise, that I was very aware that there was 2 inner clocks that we had. And Tai Chi Gong really means give power to peace. And in order to give power to peace, you have to be okay with your inner peace for that to happen. And most of us born in the Western Hemisphere, we're just wrapped way too tight. And so that journey, as I look back today, was a journey into peace, a journey into silence. By the end of the 4th year of training, we were in the process of going into Northeast India and trekking up through Nepal, and eventually crossing this border that you're actually looking at right now, if you can imagine. And actually, I was hauled in with 2 other Americans on an ox cart, wrapped up in Afghan rugs, as we made our way into southern Tibet, into a little place called Darchin, about 40 to 50 miles above the Nepal and Tibetan border. I remember that first year of training was really a challenge to me, because we were asked as one of our sadhanas there, our spiritual practice, not to talk our first year amongst ourselves, and focus on our mantras and our mala beads and our bracelet malas. And we were taught to work with our attention on the divine. And we were only allowed to talk from 1 to 3 Friday afternoons. And if we had done all of our sadhanas correctly, if we had done our chores, I had a lot of chores. It was either going out picking or working in the garden with the herbs, or I started leaning toward the kitchen, and that's where I began to really learn how to cook and make Tibetan chili and all different kind of Tibetan dishes and stuff. But every now and then a flashback of my young years would come up, and I would go to raise my hand for questions, and they would just overlook me like I wasn't there. And of course, if you were not acknowledged, you couldn't speak or It wasn't going to be right with you if you had, right? So I remember right before the end of my first year, I had gone 5 or 6 weeks and I wasn't allowed to say anything, which made me go deeper and deeper within with my meditations and my Tai Chi Gong practice. And I got very comfortable spending larger times away from the rest of the lamas and the masters. It was toward the end, and I knew my adeptship was coming up and I was going to be tested to be certified, but I had no idea what this journey was going to entail. And we spent a good half of a day packing backpacks that were a lot bigger and a lot different from what you'd see the kids today wear going to school. And I remember watching Boyan put in a couple extra blankets, and I didn't know why he was doing that until we trekked up the mountain about another 1,500 elevation. Got to a mud hut that was at the side of the mountain, and I saw smoke coming out of a little, steeple up there, and I was wondering what's going on. When I think back, it was like one of the lamas knew I was going, and they had already gone in to what looked to be an old wood fire stove like you would see in the countries in the southeast, maybe in the 1930s and the 1940s. And I looked around and I saw piles of wood, and I saw hanging different jerkies, I saw herbs, I saw tinctures, all kind of different kind of things. And the master turned to me and he says, I'm going to go get some more wood. And I kind of pondered for a moment thinking, there's enough wood here to last somebody a couple months. Again, somebody had prepared the mud hut for Lamaji. He turned back what looked very much like the skin of some ox. Looked, it would remind you a lot of an outer teepee in our Native American tribes in the West, in America. The next thing I was around, and I remember making some soup and some broth, and I didn't realize it was like I had been played a joke on. And I remember it wasn't until dark time and a couple hours had gone by, and I was starting to wonder, where is Maha Lama Boyan? And I said, well, maybe he got held up, and I kind of wrapped up, and then I saw the blankets that he had brought, and he says, oh, maybe he was concerned about me getting a little chilly and stuff, being up that high. It was about almost 9,000 elevation. It kind of gets cool in the Himalayas at about 9,000 elevations, but fortunately I had that wood burning stove, and it was designed to really milk the wood in the hot coals, and as long as you kept the coals burning. And I can remember I'd wake up every couple hours and feed the fire. Fortunately for me, working in the kitchen, part of my job in the kitchen was feeding the fire in the kitchen all the time, which had a twofold mission: to keep the stove hot at any given time that a lama or a master needed something to eat, and people that were working in the kitchen would be prepared to cook anything almost at any given time. But the second end of that stove opened up into the temple, and I knew for a fact that that part of the stove, it never gets distinguished, that most masters and lamas would rotate about every hour to hour and a half, 24 hours a day, keeping the home fires burning. And I got up there and, I was concerned mainly that something maybe had happened to Lamaji Boyang. And then about the third or fourth day, I'm going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then it hit me that I had been set up. And I remember the fourth or fifth day I was sitting down in meditation. And I thought about that inner clock that had been changing in me all these years. And I realized that I had been getting off the hamster wheel of life. And I was starting to embrace that stillness inside that King David talks about in the Psalms, be still and know. And I wanted to take some of the ancient books. They actually had a book in Tibet that was carved in sheets of jade before they even used parchment. But I remember I had a Bible that he wanted me to find, the Qi and Tai Chi Gong. And I would look at it and read a few parts of Scripture, and then the next thing you would know is I'd find myself either falling off to sleep or falling into meditation. And little by little, my practice got longer and slower. And our meditations went deeper and deeper. About the 15th, 16th day, I reckon that I was there. I remember the first 6 months in Tibet at the Lamasery, I'd asked Master Lama Boyang, what was advanced meditation? And where did it lead to? And he would always say, well, you need to get back to the body, Lama. Because, see, our basic concept in Tibet when it comes to meditation, it means to listen. Prayer means to ask. Contemplation means to become. But meditation means to listen. And I say, well, what am I listening for? He said, well, you'll be about intermediate level of meditation when you can hear the blood flow from the chambers of your heart. And it was about somewhere between that 12th to 15th day. I remember I was really quiet deep down inside, and all of a sudden it was like I was hearing a waterfall. I remember a couple times squinching my eye and opening it. Is it possible somebody has materialized a waterfall way up here in the mountains? How is it I'm hearing a waterfall? And the next thing I know that I was inside my heart, and I was listening to like white water rafting, and that was in my heart, and it sounded like white water rafting. It was absolutely amazing. I remember at that point how easy it was to breathe, that I didn't have tension in my body and in my mind and in my spirit. There was just absolutely absence of tension. And I started thinking, I said, when babies are born, there's no tension in their body. They're like the Pillsbury Doughboy. You could stick your finger into the second knuckle, and deeply, the only place that they have any tension is around the umbilical cord, around the navel. And that's from contracting and expanding and taking breath and then taking air in through the mother's cord. And I said, well, that makes sense. And I'm sitting there, I remember that really amazed with all this. Something told me on about the 20th day to reach down and grab that Bible again. And the next thing I knew, I reached down and I grabbed that Bible and I opened up that Bible, and something really wild happened. All of a sudden, I was in the middle of Hebrews, and it was like chapters 5, 6, 7 in that area. And Paul was making a reference to his brethren, because this was Paul's last epistle before he would lose his head. And he's trying to speak to his peers, his brothers and sisters, his brethren. You know, think of a parochial Hebrew school at the time, right? These were daughters and sons of the scribes and the Pharisees. And he's trying to force down their throat who Christ really was and how they had missed it, and that they had condemned and crucified the wrong person for the wrong reasons. And he was establishing a line. And he was talking about Abraham, and he was talking about Melchizedek. And I remember I was in the middle of reading Melchizedek, and it said, Miss Melchizedek, born king of Salem, that had neither father nor mother, nor beginning nor end of days, but like unto the Son of God. He ascended into a priesthood of forever. I went, holy cow, how come I never saw that before? All of a sudden, the word floated up, and in 3D, it just spread apart into syllables. And I saw male, and then I saw the word chi, Zadak. And I said, holy cow. Listen to what they say about this guy, and that he's got the word chi in the middle of his name. I have found the chi in the Bible. How did he know that I would find that? So I was really, really excited, but every now and then I would forget to eat as much as I should, and I would kind of get lightheaded at the time. And I remember I was in and out of my body a lot, and we were getting toward around the 30th day, because I was marking the days on the wall, right? I had lost the fear anymore of wondering what had happened to Bo Yang. By now I knew it was a setup, and that this was a test, and that this was a form of initiation, that I was supposed to pass this test. I'd gone way beyond the idea of maybe I'd be lost up here, parents would never find me. You got to remember, decades before internet, decades before laptops, smartphones, smart TVs, all that stuff, the only GPS I had was my Sharat, my soul, my inner being. That was my GPS. Pushing on that 30th day, I remember I was looking out. I had peeked the canvas, and I was seeing the sun begin to set right on the Himalayas. It's only 4:30, 5 o'clock, because when most of the mountains that surround you are between 10 and 20,000 elevation, and you're sitting on the smallest mountain, sun takes about 10:30 in the morning to come above the mountain. It only takes about 4:30 in the afternoon to go down. I knew by the sun that it was around about 4:30. And I remember I saw a beam of light shoot across the mountain. I didn't think anything about it at first. I thought, wow, I'm seeing a shooting star so early. What is that? And I remember I closed the flap on the mud hut. I went in to poke at the fire, and the fire and the coals got going. I remember placing a piece of wood on the fire. And the next thing I knew, I was sitting down, and a light being, a beautiful female angel with the wingspan of Archangel Michael, She was absolutely gorgeous. But she was very androgynous. She looked female, but I would look at her and not always be able to tell the sex of her, whether she was male or female. But beautiful and brilliant, transparent, colors of the rainbow coming out of her chest and out of her sternum. And she came closer to me. And the more closer she came to me, the faster my heart started to beat. And I remember she reached over and she took my hands and she pushed them in my hands. And then she motioned this, and I knew she wanted me to breathe. So I began to breathe and inhaling through the nose and exhaling out the mouth. And my tummy would inflate, and my tummy started to grow warm. And I remember hearing the word Dumo, Dumo, Dumo. And I knew that was a word I had been taught by the Lamas the first year there, which meant fire in the belly. That she was telling me that's where you want to kindle the flame. That is your stove. And so I stayed there, which seemed almost eternity. And the next thing I know, she came over and put her light hands and put my hands on top of my head. And she shined a light and hit me with some Shakti pot. And it went from the belly to the top of my head. My head lit up. My belly lit up. I was starting to become her. I was starting to become an angel. And I thought my body was going to totally just turn into light and energy right before her eyes. And I didn't care anymore because I had no fear, and definitely no fear of death whatsoever. Next thing I know, she moved her hands to my knees, and then my belly, my head, my hands and my knees lit up like Christmas tree. It was absolutely amazing to feel that warmth. I was getting warmer and warmer. I found myself removing the blanket around my shoulders because I was getting so hot on the inside, as hot as that stove. And then the next thing I know, she waved her hands and I could feel energy and fire shooting out of the balls of my feet. And my feet got hot. And I went, wow, my feet are hot. That's amazing. Next thing I knew was energy all around me. I could see and feel my energy body sparkling like diamonds. Literally like diamonds and sapphires and rubies and emeralds, and it was just absolutely, it filled the whole mud hut, went beyond the mud hut outside of it. And then a little voice inside of myself said, the fear of death is not the greatest fear, because death does not live in the divine. We have no fear of death because death does not live in the divine. And I noticed all of a sudden, I was told what the biggest fear of the whole human race was. And I was shown creation and everything at that moment. The fear of all fears was actually to live a fearless life. The hesitancy of living an unlimited, fearless life, totally divulged of fear and darkness, surrendering oneself totally to the divine, letting the divine be in you, live through you, do his bidding through you, to never ever again be separated by the divine and his Holy Spirit. I knew that this was a phenomenal moment. I said, this was the test. And I have been silent enough, and I have been still enough, peaceful enough to pay attention and to not miss this moment, because this moment was eternity. And I was living in eternity. There was no time, no space, and there was nothing that I was not connected to. I could feel the mountains breathe with me. And it was the most beautiful thing. And this beautiful angel stepped back and lit up the ceiling of the mud hut. And all of a sudden, the ceiling of the mud hut disappeared. And I looked straight up and I could see the stars. It was fully dark now, and all the stars were luminous. And she began to soar up, and as she was soaring up through the portal, all these other angels, all this time, not to my awareness, had been there, standing around. And I realized that this adeptship was an initiation. And that was a transformation for me, and that I'd never be the same. And then all of a sudden, I remember in 1968, when I came off that operating table, and my body had stopped functioning. And I remember this moment was that next moment. As if 9 years had gone by in one breath, from one spiritual moment to another spiritual moment. And everything that had happened in between was almost insignificant. What was powerful was the epiphany, between one epiphany, between another epiphany. And that God was showing me eternity. And that it's all inside of us. Every cell in our body was ignited by this energy and by this light. And it was the real manta from heaven. As the ancients say, it was asawa di kanwali. The reason I was losing the feeling for material food is because I was taking the nectar of God, and I was eating directly from that divine, showing me who and what I was. And then I realized there's a passage in Scripture I remember reading as a teenager, and that passage says that man worships the God of their belly more than the Most High God. We have to decide what God we're going to worship. We're going to worship the God of our belly, or are we going to worship the Most High God? I realize the last 5 years, 4 years in New York with Bo Yang, and the end of the first year in Tibet, 5 years to adeptship. And I realized it was all about me slowing down enough to embrace the silence, to embrace the peace, to not run from it, not be afraid of it, but to disengage from the table of life and surrender to the divine and allow the divine to run your life the way we were all designed to do. And unfortunately, Paul's speaking to a brethren that's unconscious, way more unconscious than he was. And because of that, it cut him off at the throat, right at the power center. They didn't want to hear about this, because in order to believe in what he was telling them, they would have to change a lot. And they were sons and daughters of fat cats who had everything, every material possession you could have during those days in Judea. They didn't want to make that change. They were too comfy and cozy, like still being in their mommy's tummy. And they wanted to stay comfy and cozy. And they wasn't about to embrace something that he was talking about. A fisherman? Are you crazy to follow a fisherman? Nothing good ever comes from Nazarene. Don't you know that? This guy fished in the Sea of Galilee. Who and what could he know? He was the son of a carpenter. Sound familiar? I remember we're going down the mountain. He finally showed up. And you know what? He did have some wood in his hand. That was probably the biggest joke. He said, well, I figured you used quite a bit of the wood. Maybe I should bring some to put back. I said, I can't believe you. You didn't tell me at all. He said, well, had I told you everything before, there's a part of you that probably wouldn't have wanted to go. You might have got scared being up on this mountain all by yourself. He said, but now you know. And I'm walking down and I remember I'm scratching my head and I said, Lama Boyang, what am I going to do? I'm barely almost 21 years old. You've given me so much. How am I going to share this wisdom with the people? He said, you're going to find a way to do it. Just speak from your heart. Just go back and begin to share Tai Chi Gong with the New Yorkers. I remember I was to go back and share it with New Yorkers. I'd been back about 6 to 9 months. In those days, to get an international cable or something, well, it wasn't the internet. It wasn't email. It wasn't Skype or Zoom. It was Western Union and a telegram. I got a telegram from Bo Young. And he says, I want you to go to Broadway and 42nd Street in Manhattan, Fridays from 1 to 3, pretend that you're in class. I want you to find a bench or a bulkhead, and I want you to sit down, and I want you to hear the blood flow from your heart. Oh my God, I remember the first time I went to sit down, it rained that day, and I'm sitting down, rain's pouring over my head, and I'm sitting there going, okay, Lord, how am I going to get myself back to Tibet? And I was hearing all kind of foolishness. Went back the next week, it was sunny, and I said, oh, this will be easier. It's not raining. And then they were all out there, you know, selling watches and fake pearls, and, you know, there's had to be 100,000 people who walked right by me. People were even starting to leave me money just sitting there. I guess they maybe thought I was a beggar or something. And I would just sit there. It was about 6.5 months later, I'm sitting down on that bulkhead. I closed my eyes. And I said, Master Bo Young always told me that meditation means to listen. What am I going to choose to listen to? I said, I'm going to tiptoe away from the foolishness. And I'm going to tiptoe into the heart of my peace. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to hear the ocean of the blood flowing out of my heart. And I'm going to be back on that mountain in Tibet, embracing the silence of Tibet. And then it happened. And then I realized something very powerful, brothers and sisters. Oh my God. The true meaning of the teachings of Tai Chi Gong and why it was given to humanity. See, it's a lot easier when everything's perfect. You know, when the stock market's going up, nobody sweats it until it starts to go down. And then do you know how to invest or trade? If you're not, you're probably nervous. If you're driving a car and it's your first time to take a wheel, you're kind of nervous. One day you're driving okay, the next day you're driving downtown Manhattan or Chicago and you go, oh my God, I'm nervous. Again, I'm nervous, right? But I realized that I had the ability to recall the peace and the silence of Tibet in the midst of all the chaos that was going on in Manhattan. And then I realized, oh my God, this is the real power of Tai Chi Gong, to create balance where there is no balance, to create peace where there's no peace anywhere near you, to create happiness and prosperity and aliveness, and allow the Chi, the God-given force, and 3D to pulse through us more strongly than our blood can itself. I said, this is the real power of this yuga, of the dark power yuga, the age of energy, communication, and movement. And when all of that is in alignment in my soul, I am free. Free indeed I shall be. That's when you're in control, brothers and sisters. And that's why we're going to ask you to take a look at thecircleofchi.com. Come check us out. If you want to know what Jesus meant about peace beyond all understanding, if you want to become the eye of the storm, right before we got back to the Lamasery, toward the end of that 46th day, he looked at me, Lama Boyang. He said, little Lama, he says, life will always happen to you. But where will be your state of mind? Where will be your center when life shows up and happens? Because it will happen. This few months back, I lost my mom and I lost my sister within 36 hours of each other. And I remember Boyang telling me that revelation. And I can tell you, brothers and sisters, without the peace of Tai Chi Gong, without the understanding of the circle of Chi, I would have not gotten through that. But I did. And I did right in front of everyone. And that's because his peace is in each and every one of us if we'll just yield to the silence and the peace. As we say in the Far East, Baraka Busha. May the blessings be to you and your family. Tune your calendar in for February the 12th, the second Thursday next month. And we're going to talk about being born of the fire and the Kundalini, as they say in the East. What is it like? Jesus said to Nicodemus, we are born of the water of our mother, but we must experience second birth. And for that, we need to be born of the fire of our Father. The city yoga masters, they're at the root of just about every wholesome teaching on the planet, says it is the kundalini, the sleeping serpent. Scripture refers to as Jacob's ladder, that is that birth of fire. So next month, on the 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern, Live with Lamaji will be back, and we will talk about the second birth and being born of the fire of our Father. I'm going to say, wish each and every one of you a blessing. Divine Father and Mother that lives within us, always doing the dance of the Tao, to bringing us into perfect balance and wholeness, and taking us into the light of your peace. Let us be an instrument of your peace as St. Francis was, as Boganathar was, as Melchizedek is, and as Babaji, our simple Father, is that eternal manifestation of peace, of Om Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. To you. I will see you next month, and we will talk about the birth of fire and the Kundalini. God be with you and your family and keep you as close to him as his heartbeat and as near to her as your breath. Goodbye. We say namaste. Bye-bye.